Hello family and friends, it's Rob the Sapper Gardener, and today we're going to make up a little bit of garden soil. So we're gonna make up a cart full of garden soil, actually potting soil, in our dump cart. And a lot of people say, you need to have a specific mix if you're planting in ground and raised beds and pots. The most important thing is to have soil because you can always amend it later on. If you got tomatoes in a pot, you can amend it to be specific for tomatoes. You can amend it to be specific for potatoes, cucumbers, squash, whatever you're going to put in there. But get your basic soil in, and that's your foundation. So we do specific mixes. You don't have to follow ours to a T, but specific soil types will get better results for specific vegetables, fruits, or flowers. So we start ours off typically, if we're making it from scratch, and we don't always make ours from scratch. If we catch a sale at one of the big box stores and it's really cheap, like one store, when they get ready for Thanksgiving, Christmas, Halloween, they put a lot of garden stuff on sale, dirt cheap. We'll go up there with our trailer, we'll buy up a bunch, and we'll use that throughout the year or the next year. But it's usually easier to make it. We also go to our garden center. If you buy it bulk, if you have a trailer or pickup truck where you can get it by the cubic yard, that's usually cheaper than buying bag soil. But we get coco coir in bulk. We get our perlite in bulk. We get huge bags of it. When I say bulk, I don't mean a pallet full. I mean larger quantities, not, a small bag like you might get at your grocery store. We get big bags of perlite, vermiculite, milagranite. We get big blocks of coco coir, and we use that to mix up our soil. And I'm going to mix some up right now because we've got a bunch of containers that we need to fill up. So I'm going to add in some coco coir, rehydrate it. I'm going to add in some worm casting, some vermiculite, some perlite. If we have peat moss, some people like using peat moss, some don't, but the peat moss and the coco coir are somewhat interchangeable. But if we catch peat moss on sale, we'll buy that. We'll add some of that in too. And worm castings are our primary fertilizer, but if we can get organic fertilizer that we can put in there, we'll do that. We use our compost, we add that in. Sometimes we'll buy compost if we're low, but there's no excuse for us to be low because we've got two big compost piles and a compost tumbler, and we also use our composting tubes in our garden. But that's the basics that we put in ours. We'll add in rock dust. If we have it, azomite's the rock dust of choice for us. And just depending on what vegetables you have, amend it as you need to. So let me get this coco coir rehydrated so I can get to mixing. So we had a lot of wind noise here, so we decided to do a voiceover. We're rehydrating our coco coir blocks, and these are large blocks that we get online. We do try to buy stuff in bulk whenever possible, and when we say bulk, we don't mean we get palletfuls, we just get larger quantities. So we get these in a 36 count pack, so 36 of these makes quite a bit of garden soil for us, and usually last a year or two making soil in the garden. We get the blocks, we rehydrate them. They do rehydrate better in warm water, so we try to do this on warmer days when possible. The blocks rehydrate fairly quickly. You can actually just sit them in water and leave them, come back in a couple of hours, and they should be fully rehydrated. Or you can do what I'm doing, water it, break it up as much as possible, and that will get you the end result a little bit quicker. We do get other things in bulk as well, and again, when I say bulk, we mean large quantities, as large as possible for the price and what we can afford. So we get large bags of perlite, large bags of vermiculite, large bags and quantities of worm castings, and anything else that we're going to use. We generally try to avoid buying small quantities at the big box stores or at the grocery stores, because those are convenient, but cost wise it's just not the best return on investment. So I'm going to try to get this rehydrated, and if you are starting to have problems rehydrating it, you can always take your garden fork, which is what I'm about to do, and pick at it, because the more surface area you can expose to the water, the quicker it'll rehydrate. So you can break it up into chunks. You can just pick at it a little bit and it will rehydrate fairly quickly. So when you're making this, don't worry as much about overwatering or underwatering. You can always add more water if you need to. But if you find that your mixture is getting a little wetter than you want it to get, remember you're going to add other amendments into it. You're going to add in some perlite, you're going to add in some vermiculite, some type of fertilizer, possibly some lime, just different amendments depending on where you're using it, in the garden, in a pot. If you're making it for seed starting, each one of those scenarios, you'll have a different soil need. One thing that we do, in addition to the large blocks that I'm using here, we also buy smaller blocks, also still in larger quantities, that we use indoors if we're making a mix for starting microgreens or seed starting, or potting up small containers indoors that we'll use. And if I find that I've added too much water to this mixture out in the garden, I'll take one of those smaller mixes indoors and then I'll just add a little bit more to it. So over time you just get a hang of what you need to make for your particular mixture, how much water you'll need, and if you're off a little one way or another, you can always either add more water or add a little bit more of a cocoa coir mix. And once you're done, you add in your amendments, you mix that all together, and hopefully you have a nice looking mix like we have for our soil. And after a little bit of mixing, we got us a nice little more than a half cubic yard of a nice soil mix that we'll use to fill up containers, grow bags, top off some of our garden beds, and nice. Love when that wind starts up right as you're starting to talk. Matter of fact, hold on a minute. Alright, we left the wind outside and I stepped inside the greenhouse for a minute. But a few simple ingredients make up a nice soil mix. You always want to have your base, which can be peat moss, it can be cocoa coir, you can use sand, you can use whatever you want for your base. That's just basically filler. It's best to have some organic filler that's going to break down in your soil, but if all you have is sand to start off with, you can use that, but you always want to amend it with some type fertilizer, and as much organic material as you can add into it. I wouldn't advise to grow just in sand, but I know some gardeners who grow just in sand and then they add some amendments, but it's all in what you can afford and what you're growing. But for ours, we got a nice, a little bit more than a half cubic yard. I keep saying square yard, I mean a cubic yard, a little more than half cubic yard, and that'll fill up a lot of pots for us, and that's enough to probably top off one or two, maybe three of our 4x4 garden beds, depending on how much topping off they need. But that's our process. I may add a link, or I'm sorry, not a link, a few slides at the end that show the basic ratios that we use if we're making garden soil versus potting soil and seed starting mix, because they're all a little bit different. They don't have to be, but each one has a purpose. So I'll let you look at what we do, and I'll be honest, we base ours off that, but I'm pretty much using the eyeball method. Whenever I do anything, I don't really measure anything out. I just eyeball it and hope I'm close to what we're trying to get. So I'm gonna go do a little bit more work, and I can smell Mrs. SG in there cooking, so I suspect I'll be at the table in a few minutes, and I'll give you guys a quick shot of what she cooked for dinner, because I don't know what it is, but it smells good. So on behalf of the family here at Essayons Family Garden, this is Rob, the Sapper Gardener, saying God bless our great country America. You, wherever you reside around the world, your garden, your harvest, your kitchen, your meals, and especially your family, to have health, success, and prosperity, especially during these troubling times. Take care. Sapper out. And Sydney, you can't see it, and it's dirty now, but I got my shirt game on today. Sydney at the Nakid Gardeners. It says, "That's what I do. I cook and I know things, and sometimes we garden too." Take care. Sapper out.